with personally because I see the size that I kind of like a corner. I like the instincts there. I also think that translates very well to safety. I just at the same time he is a little bit inconsistent as a tackler, and so obviously at safety you cannot be inconsistent at tackler. I'm going to need you to be the last line of defense that way. So he's one of those players that looks the part, but I'm still kind of struggling with exactly where I think that he fits in best in the league. And so I think there's a lot of examples of guys who played corner in college that have made that transition to safety at a full time level. You mentioned Sharper. I mentioned Desmond King, and then another Seattle guy, Bradley McDougald. Same kind of thing. I mean, played a lot of corner back in his college days as well. So to me, that's what's fascinating about this is that we see it happen on the offensive line where I know a little bit more, having played there at my little pathetic high school level when I played, but that we were basically taught to play all 5 different positions, left tackle to right tackle and everywhere in between. And so it wasn't the difficult transition, at least at that lower level, from one position to another. But, obviously at the higher level, college and NFL, to make that switch to corner to safety or vice versa, I think it is very difficult. And really it speaks to the types of player that they are as far as in their head and in their heart. Are they going to be willing to make a position change? And so going back, are there players that you thought physically could make that switch to corner or could make that switch to safety, but that for whatever reason they just struggled making that switch and then you had to move them back?
Well, the thing about it is, the key thing is, I mean, I got multiple names, but the key thing is when you're a corner, you're on one side of the field.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? When you're at safety, either strong or free, it doesn't matter. If you're strong, you got to be able to read the run, understand that you got to cover the back, cover the tight end, whatever. If you're free, you got to cover both sides of the field.
Yeah.
When you're a corner, you're on one side. This is it. This is your man. This is what you do. The thing with corners, and not knocking them because there's a lot of really good ones, you don't have to be as instinctive or as intelligent as a safety.
Yeah.
The safety has to be like the core guy. Now, Cam Chancellor in Seattle,
Yep.
He ran that back half, meaning both corners in him and Earl. He lined them up. He ran the whole thing. So it's like a quarterback back there. As a corner, that's not what they do. They're there to cover. They're there to tackle up front if the ball comes their way.
Mm-hmm.
But the safety's got a lot more responsibility than a corner has.
Yeah, no, and that's you kind of went down exactly the route I was hoping that you would, because I agree with you. I think that the safety has to be a much more instinctive player, and so I mentioned before for corners, for me, I'm looking for those light feet. I'm looking for the the size certainly is important, but also the ball skills. But at safety, one of my top priorities is actually just their vision. I want to make sure that they are seeing all across the field, that they are not allowing the receivers to get behind them because they're anticipating the routes that they might be facing on that particular snap. And so I 100% agree. I think that safeties are even more important than corners in a lot of ways in today's NFL, because I think that we're seeing that the teams that can strike quickly are the ones that are the ones that are going to score the most points and going to be the most successful. And if you have those safeties who are instinctive, who do have that vision, and obviously speed is important, range and tackling ability, but I think that vision is an underrated component when grading safeties. And I don't know that it necessarily is nearly as important at the corner position. And so it's kind of like when we talked about before the offensive line, how I feel like a lot of offensive linemen, obviously there's a little bit more priority at pass protecting if you're out at playing tackle than it is if you're in center or guard where you have some protection. But same kind of thing. A corner, I think it's a fairly unique skill set, and so that's why it is fascinating when you find a safety playing a fairly different role being asked to make that change.
No, I agree. It's vision's huge for a safety, and again, like I said earlier, ball skills I think are very, very important. But you got to be able to see the whole field, not just a quarter of the field or half the field. You got to see the whole field, and you got to be tough, and you got to bring it when you got to bring it downhill, or you got to have speed. If all of a sudden the corner gets speed over the top, you got to be able to run, and those are the best safeties, But the corners, don't get me wrong, corners are very important, very important. And they're harder to find than safeties. You can find safeties. If you're a tough guy, if you want an athletic guy, you can find those type of guys. Corners, it's harder to identify. Okay, is he, like I said, a press, a man off? Is he a zone guy? Because there's been teams that had a lot of success with cover two, and that's all zone. Yep. And there's teams like Seattle that we keep talking about that had a lot of success with man press.
Okay, and then the last thing I was going to mention to you is I've been kind of getting some ribbing from some of our listeners, and they're saying, hey, why don't you start asking Scott a little bit more about the GOATs, the greatest he's ever seen and things of that nature. You talked about before Deion Sanders. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but he is the best cover corner I've ever seen. As far as all-around game, I've got a name that I'll throw out there. And so I'm curious if you could mention favorite cover corner and then the favorite corner all around that you've ever seen, whether it be college or NFL. And so I'll throw you mine out there. Cover corner, to me, it's Deion Sanders, and just his ability to change directions, all those things, I think is just incredible. But then all around, I thought it was Rod Woodson. Just his physicality, he played, of course, a lot of safety as well. But just his ability to play just about everywhere that Pittsburgh ever asked him, to me, was one of the more remarkable things that I ever saw. And just wanted to get kind of your thoughts on whether you agree or if there was other players that you wanted to mention.
No, I agree. Woodson was phenomenal from the standpoint what we talked about. He played corner and safety.
Yep.
And, sat out a year to go to the Olympics and run the hurdles, and it came back and then drop off a B. But no, Deion's the best I've ever seen. But I'll tell you one that's kind of out of the left field here, Darrell Green.
Yeah.
Little guy. But I tell you what, he was a really good player for a long time.
Phenomenal player. And everybody talks about the speed. It's kind of like, I mentioned before with Sherman, everybody talks about his length. Everybody talks about the interceptions and the mouth, frankly. But Darrell Green was so much more than just speed.
He was a really good player. Really good player. You know what, too? In my time in Washington, meeting him and talking ball with him, he was football through and through. Not a big guy.
Yeah.
But just a good football player. A really good football player.
Mm-hmm.
I remember growing up watching Lester Hayes.
Yeah.
He played linebacker, in college, and all of a sudden became a corner and was excellent. Now we're talking old school. We're talking press man guy.
Yeah.
That's all he did. But he was really good. I can mention numerous of them. The ones I've been around, like I said, Trufant I thought was really good. Of course, Sherman's really good. I think Josh Norman, in Seattle or Washington, is really good. Now he's got time to prove it still, but I think overall he's one of those guys that when the defense is right, he's a shutdown guy, and they're hard to find. I'm telling you, they're hard to find. You get to when you watch corners, especially in the NFL, if they follow the best receiver, that's when you know you got a corner that's pretty good. Because
good point.
With Odell, with the Giants, Beckham, okay, Josh, you're gonna follow him. He goes on the left side, he goes on the right side. You're gonna be with him no matter what. So it proves that you have faith in them. Doesn't mean they're great players, but it means that that's their best corner, because they trust them on the best receiver. And as you're well aware nowadays with the way this offenses are rolling, they're going to score points. There's no doubt about it. But you nailed something on the head that I didn't talk about is the fact that you got to have a short memory. You got to let it go, because you're going to get beat. There's no question about it. You're going to get beat. The good ones bounce back and say, okay, you got me. You got lucky. Okay, now it's my turn.
Yeah, exactly. And the great corners, when it is their turn, as we talked about, then they're able to pick it off and take it back the other way, and really be those game changers.
Correct.
Okay, well, that wraps about up this week. We had quite the breakdown as far as the cornerbacks that are really kind of taking over today's modern NFL and college football in some ways. Thank you all so much for listening and supporting the Instinctive Scouting Podcast. This and prior episodes are always available for free and immediate download at NFLDraftScout.com. For Scot McCloughan, this is Rob Rang, signing off on this week's episode of the ISP. Catch you later.